Shabbat shalom to everyone. It's a hard time to be Jewish. I don't know if it's ever been an easy time to be Jewish, but right now, the fear and the struggle feel especially overwhelming, both within our people and from outside forces of hatred. And I feel like we could have been saying this over and over again, but it still feels all the more so true. Internally, we face heartbreaking realities, and just this past week, I was devastated by the news of Sefula Masalet, who was a young American Palestinian man from Florida. He traveled to the West Bank to visit his family and was brutally murdered by Israeli settlers. He lay dying for hours before an ambulance was able to reach him, and it was too late at that time to save his life. This happened in the name of God, in the name of our tradition, and on Shabbat. I can't fathom it. And he's not the only one. Settler violence is rampant. Our people are torn, and it's not just through this, but it's about the Israeli government, it's the state of Israel today, and even our local politics right here in New York City, our national politics, were broken from within. And then externally, we know anti-Semitism is rising around the world, and even in our own backyard, once again here in New York City. And only just a few weeks ago, the shul where I used to daven when I went abroad to Melbourne, Australia, there was a firebomb that was thrown into the synagogue there. Thank God everyone was okay, but it's a reality of our world today. We're scared, and we're very, very broken. And in our fear, it can be hard for us to show up fully, to show up for each other, and then also to show up in the world that's around us. And it's in this heaviness that makes the Jewish calendar feel really deeply relevant right now. And Rolly spoke about this last night, that last Sunday marked the beginning of a period that we're in called the 3 weeks. Bein HaMetzarim, which is also known as this narrow place, being in the narrow straits. And it's 21 days that lead us up to Tisha B'Av, which is our communal day of mourning, of commemorating the breach of the walls, which was the 17th of Tammuz, all the way to the destruction of our temples and all of the destruction of our people throughout the years. Some take on a custom during this time of mourning, which means no weddings, no haircuts, no live music. Some have a custom also to start a little bit later, closer to Tisha B'Av. And this year, and in this time, it feels like we've been stuck in these straits for so long at this point that the practice of mourning not only feels relevant, but it's almost welcome. Who among us hasn't asked at certain points, can we find joy when so much suffering is happening around us? Even though we know it's so important, it's hard. And so it feels like this couldn't come at a better time. It's easy. Sometimes it's harder to steep into the calendar, and right now it feels a little bit easier in some ways. And then we have this week's Parasha, which is Pinhas. And the Parsha closes with a long list of all of our major Jewish holidays. From Pesach to Shavuot, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and then Shmini Atzeret, it outlines all of the offerings and sacrifices for each of them, and then it ends with these words of Eile ta'asu l'Adonai b'moadechem. These you shall offer to God in their appointed times, our moed, our holy special times. It's a needed reminder that in times like these, when it feels particularly hard to be Jewish, one of the ways we stay so connected and that we find that holiness is by surrendering to the rhythm of the Jewish time that we were given as a gift and allowing the calendar to guide us. As Rabbi Yitz Greenberg writes in his book on holidays, it's a beautiful book called The Jewish Way. He says, the holy days are the unbroken master code of Judaism. Decipher them and you will discover the inner sanctum of this religion. Grasp them, and you will hold the heart of the faith in your hand. The calendar holds us. It reminds us who we have been, who we are, and who we hope to become. When we feel stuck in the straits, it reflects our pain, and it also insists that we have to move forward, even when that moving feels impossible. And each of the holidays on their own, they bring a unique spiritual lens to our lives and a possibility and opening. With Pesach comes redemption. With Shavuot, it invites commitment and love and Torah. The Yamim Norim, Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur bring renewal and repentance and returning. Sukkot offers this fragility and openness that we have. And then we have our minor holidays, which aren't listed in the Parsha this week, but still, Chanukah gives us light in the darkest time of the year. And Tu B'Shvat connects us to nature and reminds us that we're a people who are so deeply caring and connected to the nature around us. And Rosh Chodesh comes every single month to tell us that new beginnings are always possible. And then we have Tisha B'Av, which gives us space for our national grief and collective heartbreak. These are all of some of the more traditional ones, but we even have modern holidays that have come up throughout the years, which definitely is not written in our Parsha this week. But then we have all of the Yoms. We have Yom HaShoah, Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaAtzmaut, which brings us into our modern story, and it makes us think about the pain and complexity and the fraught blessings of what it is to have a Jewish statehood, and also make us ask the questions of what does it mean when we have power, and what does it mean to have a home? My teacher, Rabbi Evan Leader, highlights another powerful way that our rabbinic tradition sees the calendar as a single narrative arc. So instead of looking at them as each separate holiday, one of the ways that we can do this is also to step into it each year, understanding that it's a full story. Each holiday brings us on this story together. And when we see this narrative as one whole, which the Torah and also our rabbis like to paint for us, we can begin to understand the spiritual impact of each holiday in a new way. And then he gives this example using this time period right now, that usually we think of Tisha B'Av as the heart of tragedy. It's our lowest point. But the rabbis remind us that the true breaking point came earlier, and that was the 17th of Tammuz, which was the fast day of last Sunday. And that's in the rabbinic tradition when Moshe shattered the tablets after the sin of the golden calf. So this golden calf happened at that point. Moshe takes the Torah, in which we just committed to, in which we just said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we are going to live this life, we are going to be in this relationship with you, and threw it to the ground. And that moment nearly ended the covenant. The breaking began by confusion and betrayal and hurt, and it was that moment and not the final destruction, although that was inevitably coming in a few weeks. It mirrors our own moment now. The deep pain doesn't always arrive in fire, but it starts with a fracture, when we're not sure if we can actually move forward together. But Rabbi Greenberg also offers another lens, or as our rabbis would say when they're teaching a midrash or some kind of text, they'll say davar acher. It's another type of interpretation of thinking about the holidays, so I wanted to give this to you. The calendar is Judaism's central teacher for living life with hope and redemption at its core. He thinks about the calendar as our number one pedagogical tool in living a Jewish life. Judaism begins with the radical idea that every human being is created in the image of God. And yet history is filled, as we know, with moments where the truth is not that every person is given this dignity. More so, it's that we take away this dignity from humanity. And Rabbi Greenberg writes, life will triumph over its enemies. Before we are done, humanity will achieve the fullest realization of the dignity of the human being. And he continues, Jewish tradition has dreams, not illusions. Redemption is a statement of hope. Redemption is a statement of hope. The Torah offers a goal worthy of human effort. The holidays nurture the infinite love and unending faith needed to sustain people until perfection is achieved. The core of Judaism, he says, and its holidays is redemption and its hope. And according to him, Jewish law guides us, but it's the calendar that teaches us how to do it. It's the calendar that takes us from the ordinary and reminds us of the extraordinary and allows them to be in conversation, allows us to go from one to the other. And for those of us who may not live fully bound to halakha or the Jewish way, it's the calendar that still reminds us how deeply our lives are connected to tradition and to one another. It reminds us who we are and what it is that we all value. And it's also what reminds us that we are the partners with God in helping to heal our world until we get to that point of perfection, which feels far away. It's not an easy time to be Jewish, but Judaism offers a path forward. And it's not by denying our pain, but by helping us hold it, teaching us how to live through it, and even forcing us to hold it while we celebrate. The calendar doesn't erase any of our heartbreak and heartache, and it also doesn't erase the joy. It gives both meaning, and it gives both of them direction. It helps us become the people we dream of being, people rooted in a story that tells us and that insists every life matters, and that redemption is possible in any moment. I began with one image of the Jewish people this week, one that is so broken, one that is so painful to think about, that is our people. But I wanted to end with another one that I keep holding. In the news this week, I can't get these two images out of my head. Some of you may have seen this story, but it was going around, and this is of John Polin, who was the father of Hirsch Goldberg Polin, one of the young men who was kidnapped on October 7th from the Nova Festival and brutally murdered last August in the tunnels in Gaza. Recently, John was on a plane flying, I think, to America or back to Israel, and he was asked by the community. The plane had to wait for a little bit, and so somebody asked him if he would lead the morning services. And so he led the services, and there was another passenger on the plane who got very upset. And he got in his face and started screaming, "Sheket, sheket, quiet, quiet." And at one point, John would continue to lower his voice as much as possible, and at one point, this other passenger actually tried to hit him. He dodged the hit, but he tried to hit him. And he lowered his voice again, and finally the man angrily walked back to his seat. And after this encounter, one of the other passengers was sharing what happened. John went over to the man who yelled at him and tried to hit him, and he quietly apologized. And he said, "I'm sorry for disturbing you." It's hard not to think about that kind of an image with so much hate, but countered by so much humility and love. In contrast to the anger and the violence and the hate of the settlers and even this other passenger, it's John's kindness and humility and dignity that points us toward redemption. It's the very qualities that our holidays, the ones we're going to read about today, invite us and remind us to embody. And while redemption, as I said, feels really, really far away, the Jewish calendar brings it close, even right now, even Bein HaMetzarim, when we find ourselves in this narrow place waiting for the destruction. It still tells us to hold this idea of hope in our hearts and in our hands, and to plant ourselves in the reality of the world that we live in, but also to dream of what redemption can be, and to let that dream transform us and transform our world. Keni Ratzon, may it be. Shabbat Shalom.